hunt him down and butcher him.
Welcome to the Spirit of Independence. On today's episode we look at the work of Rob Speranza, a New York-born producer now living in Sheffield. Alongside setting up the South Yorkshire Filmmakers network, Rob has produced some feature films set in and around the region. Today, Rob is the producer. So Rob, I must admit there's not too many New Yorkers in Sheffield, so I'm just quite curious as to what brought you to Sheffield in the first instance.
It's one of those old stories. It was a woman in the first instance, you know, for my sins, like, you know. But to be honest with you, I always wanted to come to England, and I wanted to do a master's degree to begin with, you know, and it was all academic type of stuff, you know. And the MA, I was only supposed to be here for a year doing the MA, and the MA kind of morphed itself into a PhD, and I got a little bit of funding to continue. And then I did the PhD, and about partway through that, I started falling in with groups of people that were making films rather than just sort of writing about them, because I was just going to be an academic. I was going to write about film and poetry and, you know, kind of learn about avant-garde stuff and experimental stuff. And then I kind of found that, you know, that wouldn't make me any money. So I kind of wanted to become a lot more commercial. I still finished my PhD, but after falling in with a few other filmmakers, Ed Cartledge with Sort of Films, and a few other people that were in the filmmaking society at that time, and have all spread around the country now. You know, I joined Sort of Films, and then that became a limited company, and that kind of gave birth to the company that I'm running now, which is the South Yorkshire Filmmakers Network. Yeah,
and I think that's what most people know you for, and certainly how I hooked up with you originally. And I think it's one of those invaluable tools that really a community needs. So where did the idea come from for SYFN?
Well, I remember, like, in the first initial phases of having meetings with Sort of Films, we were like, you know, we'd meet outside a pub. It'd be a sunny day, and we all spread out in the grass and stuff. And then, you know, we would have a meeting and, like, just talk about, like, amongst other filmmakers that were there, what's your favorite music video? What's your favorite performance in a film ever? Let's watch it and talk about it and stuff like that. And we were kind of realizing that we weren't really running a production company. If we were doing things like that, we were kind of running a network, you know. And Ed and I were talking about that. This is back in something like 2004, you know, 2003, you know, around that kind of time, I would think. Maybe actually earlier than that, yeah, 2003. And he said, you know, we should form a network here. So it was the Sheffield Filmmakers Network first, and then I was like, well, we should go a lot further than that, actually. And it became the South Yorkshire one. And to be honest, I've not changed the name again, because since then it's become a decent icon, you know, a decent name. But it could very easily be called like a Northern Film Network, which at the time was something else that doesn't exist anymore. It could have been Yorkshire Film Network, you know. But I like the fact that we have a base in Sheffield. And it's a really nice central location. We can strike out to lots of other places, and it's a nice central place to be. And a lot of people enjoy coming here, you know. So yeah, that's why I stayed. So
how did you initially kind of reach out to those people to get people to form part of SYFN?
I think that happened in a lot of different ways. You know, first it was like, you know, just kind of getting the message out there on national networks like Shooting People or Talent Circle at the time. This is what we're doing. You know, we're having events. We run the 2 weeks to make it music video competition, getting the word out there to people. And then eventually it was also kind of like a bit of word of mouth. The Filmmakers Society, people in the workstation. It was kind of a general thing, also making films. We put the film together, and then the crew come together. They start talking about what you're doing, and the next person that they're friends with that also edits and does some camera work, they want to know about it. So eventually it grew from like 8 or 9 people in a pub to 20 or 25 people in a pub, to realizing we couldn't really afford to be in the pub anymore because too many people. And now there's, what, 1,700 people all, you know, in the network in some manner.
Important people.
Mumbling again, Billy.
My granny is important. She is magic. She is a witch.
how did you then look at bridging that gap? You've studied academically,
Yeah.
set up SYFN. What brought you to moving into producing films?
I think the first project, it was a project we worked with Sort of Films and kind of what became the network. And it was a film that was kind of trying to send a message out there against teenage pregnancy. At the time, there was a huge problem in South Yorkshire. It was one of the worst places in Europe for people under 18 getting pregnant, and they wanted to get that message out there. So we made a film with a little bit of NHS support and a little support from the local schools to get out there and get that message out there. So that was one of the first things I did that had a little bit of money behind it. But no, I was making applications to Screen Yorkshire at the time with the UK Film Council, who were funding short films, and I was trying to get funding for a couple of short films we had ideas for. And I think we were rejected, 2-3 times. And I was starting to damp the spirit a little bit. But then one day, after the third interview, I think, going in there and talking to Tony Dixon, who was the exec there at the time, I got a phone call saying, hey, you know what, we really liked you when you came to the interview, but we didn't really like the film that you were pitching with your team there, but we thought you have the makings of a good producer. Listen, we've had a late green light in all the films that we've commissioned this year. They had commissioned 8 films, and I think mine would have been the 9th. And they said, you're interested in meeting this writer-director team from Hull. I was like, oh, yeah, sure, I'm interested. Tell me about it. It was a kid's story, but they didn't realize it was a kid's story at the time. So basically, I joined that team, went up to meet them, made a film with them called Show and Spell, which is a charming little film about a little boy who thinks his granny's a witch. And that film did very well. I think it kind of surprised everybody because it was a late green light. They weren't sure about the script, but we whipped it into shape a little bit. And I think I remember the team were trying too hard to make a horror film, and but it's for 13-year-olds. I'm like, how are you going to do that? So we realized it was kind of more of a child's. It was a children's film, and it was right because we wound up selling it to CBBC, made Screen Yorkshire and ourselves some money back, and they were just in shock because no one made money back from a short film. And that led me to getting commissioned, 3, 4, 7 more times, actually, to make short films with Screen Yorkshire.
Yeah, and I know you've made some films with Matt Tarber, who was in the first series, Sue Everett, who Matt knows as well. How did you find working with guys in the community? You're obviously dealing with different people's styles. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's part of the job for a producer. If you are only going to be used to be working with one person, you're probably not going to really get on too well unless, that person is really successful and they make films and you can kind of, keep a career with them over and over again. There's plenty of producers that do that. But I think, if you're going to work with multiple people, which is probably a good idea when you're first starting out, you've got to be malleable, you've got to be flexible, you've got to be able to match up with other people's personalities and understand how they work. And obviously, there are some people that aren't going to work well together, and then, okay, well, that's not a great partnership. But with Sue and with Matt and with Sam Donovan and Quentin and Quentin Budworth, some of these other people that I've made short films with, I've found that there were some really good partnerships that started to, get formed, and I was really willing to continue developing them. And Matt's a perfect example. I've made 3 short films and a little music video with Matt, a little short documentary about music with Matt, and I've really enjoyed making stuff with him, and I'm helping him develop his first feature as well.
Is your coggy in?
His name's Danny.
Is he in?
Go and have a go. Feels good, nice. No, I'm alright.
So you moved from shorts, and I understand the first feature you did was Small Creatures.
Yes.
Which I understand you went on to win an award. Tell me about the process of moving from shorts into a feature.
Yeah, sure. With the short films, it was great to get a bit of a track record making short films for a while first. And, obviously win a few awards, get around there, go a few festivals around the world, and kind of soak it up and understand what this is all like and what other filmmakers are doing. And sometimes when you go to those short film festivals and you meet other people and you find out that they're already developing this and already going to that, you kind of get the fire for it. You go, I got to, what am I doing? Come on, I got to get onto that too, And that's kind of what it felt like a little bit. Small Creatures was a film in Liverpool. I just answered an advert that was literally on one of those shooting people type networks, and I was the line producer, got hired as a line producer on that film to help the main guy, Martin Wallace, who was the writer, director, and producer at the time. It was a one-man band type of thing, and raising money all himself. And he brought me on board to kind of whip it all into shape a little bit, get the crew, do a budget, equipment, make the deals at locations. You know, one of my most famous deals is on that one. Unprecedented, amazing cost deal that I got to shoot in the London Underground. Apparently no one's ever undercut them that much. So, that was pretty good. And that was a film about three kids that get into some serious trouble on their summer vacation. It blossoms into something that they don't realize it was that serious. And they wind up having to go on the run. It was nominated for Best Film at Edinburgh and Best Performance as well. And you know, won a few awards in America, and I had a great screening in Los Angeles. So yeah, it did well, you know, and that led me on to kind of thinking, okay, I could do this. I could make a few features here.
Did you find there was significant differences in between producing features to shorts?
Yeah, it was a lot harder, that's for sure. A lot more to deal with. You know, there's that kind of sustained, you know, 3, 4, 5 weeks of shooting type of thing. So many more things that go wrong with the weather and locations and crew and people getting sick and getting better paid jobs and leaving. You know, with a short film, you know, you could kind of like say, listen, I need like, you know, 3, 4, 5 days block of your time. People can deal with that on a lower rate of pay. But when you ask them to do that for 5 weeks, that can get a little, you know, much.
Yeah.
And that was very, very challenging on a low budget film like Small Creatures, total budget being like around 80 grand. You know, so it was quite difficult. I enjoyed the whole process, of course, and it led to, you know, sort of bigger and better things in films that, to me, you know, might even be a little bit more on the commercial side, because as you know, I've done some horror films since then.
Yeah. And how did you find sort of approaching the festival idea and getting something into a festival? How do you approach that side of things?
I think it was quite comparable to look at how to get a feature film into a festival, as very similar to how I make get a short film into a festival, to be honest. It wasn't too much of a difference. I mean, at the same time, you know, in every case, there's always an application form, there's always an application process, there's always a sort of certain festival that might fit your film, that might not fit another one. You know, I think you kind of tailor-make sometimes the festivals that you want to put your film into. You know, which ones might be a good match. So for Small Creatures, you know, festivals like Edinburgh and festivals like some more like kind of left of center festivals would probably be good. But at the same time, it did well kind of on some festivals that like were just looking for interesting material as well, because it certainly isn't a mainstream film. But at the same time, it's not like something like really weird and experimental and odd and weird colors either.
They brought people like me here. They did this to people like me.
So you crossed over into the horror genre, which, you know, after knowing you for a number of years, it seemed like it's an odd move for you to an extent. What kind of led you to working in that genre?
I think, you know, as a producer, you're just, you know, a fledgling producer, starting your filmmaking career, trying to get films out there and get seen. And horror is a genre that always has an audience, always has a certain degree of festival playability, marketability, you know, places you could get your films in. And as a beginning producer, I mean, I like horror films. My wife loves them. You know, she loves them a lot more than I do in many ways. But I thought this is a great place to kind of begin. And you could do them sometimes on lower budgets. I mean, not all the time, really well, but oftentimes you can do them pretty well. Yeah. If you kind of know, if you got a good story behind you. And yeah, and Inbred was the same kind of thing. The first horror film I made, and that was also a response to an advert. You know, they were looking for a line producer. They asked me to actually come on board as a full producer on that film, and I wasn't able to because I knew I had Entity staring me in the face about 3 or 4 months after. Matter of fact, I remember even the director of Entity, Steve Stone, saying to me, "If they ask you to produce that film, if something goes wrong, they want you to, please don't do it, please don't do it, you'll scupper mine, you'll scupper." So I had to like promise him. So when Alex Shandon asked me to produce Inbred, I was like,
it's quite funny you saying, because Inbred, I understand Entity, we filmed in North Yorkshire as well.
Yeah, that's right.
And Entity had such an interesting location that I didn't know where it was until you just told me. So what's it like managing a crew when you're kind of out there in the woods and, you know, you're not near any home comforts or anything like that.
Oh, I had done it before on short film, so I had a bit of a feel for shooting in the woods and in farms, and or just out there in the wilderness type of thing. I remember actually Steve, when he took me to the locations for Entity, that was one of the things that got me onto the project. He sold it to me as he sold it to a number of other people, like the DOP and production designer, by taking them to the locations that he knew about. He worked in a series of defunct UK coal mines. And he was showing us all these buildings that he could get access to because he had made a sort of loose deal with them already. So they were amazing to see, and that really kind of pushed me into the project a little bit more. It's a difficult thing, but once you get all the amenities that you need, toilets and food and that kind of stuff, just make sure that you can get things. Well, people will feel at least as much close to home as they possibly can. You could do all right.
Down in the meat aisle at my local shop, picked up some sausages and a can of pop. Waiting in the queue was a lovely lady. I knew right then that she could have been my baby. I downed the carton of the fizzy juice, caressed the hair with my meaty produce. It's a fine line between love and crime. It really is. If I get arrested, baby, I'll do the time. 'Cause it's a fine line between love and crime. It's hard to tell, baby, give me a sign.
2 weeks to make it, and I think that was probably one of the first times that I met you, working on that competition. Great concept, still going on today. Yeah. What have been some of the success stories and benefits that you've seen from it?
I think the biggest benefit with 2 weeks to make it, I mean, probably briefly describe it too. I mean, it's obviously it's a music video competition, and what we do is we randomly place filmmakers and musicians together, give them exactly 2 weeks to make a music video, and there's a double meaning to the title. It's like, okay, you have to make the film, but also the musician gets a release and a chart registered kind of recognition, as well as the video gets chart registered release and all kinds of training and stuff. Basically, venturing more into the professional industry. Same thing with the filmmakers. They get the same kind of level of equipment hire and pushing and marketability afterwards. So that's the kind of meaning behind it. I love the concept, and really the biggest success story for me is not necessarily if the band goes on to stardom or gets like I remember one of the songs that we made a video for, like O2 grabbed the band and used the song in some of their adverts, and I was like listening to it in the cinema going, that's, and it's great that kind of stuff happens. And it's not only because of 2 weeks to make it either. Obviously it's because of the band being skilled and the filmmakers too. But for me, the best and most successful stories come out when you hear about a partnership that gets formed during that 2 week period. These people don't know each other from Adam before they meet at the launch event and stuff. Then they get jammed together at random. Right, okay, I'm working with this person or this group of people for 2 weeks. And what do? They go on to make more stuff together beyond the 2 week period. The filmmakers make the band's next music video. The filmmakers call upon that band next time they need some music for a film they're making independently or whatever. And you see them start to work together in other ways too. Like, oh, one of the band members has some graphic design skills or animation skills, and they want to do something for the filmmaker, the next thing. It's just nice to see those partnerships happen in multifaceted ways. And I think that's really valuable. Those are the biggest benefits for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you want to tell us a bit about Arthur and Merlin? Because I know it's just sort of finished wrapping on the shoot. How was the experience on that?
Well, yeah, the latest feature I've been a producer on. It's we're trying to do something quite epic here. Obviously, the film's not finished yet; will be soon. But Arthur and Merlin is a film that is meant to have a bit of a Hollywood epic feel to it. Obviously, it's an Arthur and Merlin story, kind of in their younger days. How did they meet? How did they come together? What were their first challenges that they faced together? And yeah, that'll be premiering soon. It was a tough project because we're looking to show on the big screen here and on the small screen too something that feels and looks Hollywood epic, but was made in a rather small budget in Yorkshire, and okay, Gloucestershire and Hampshire as well. But it's nice to kind of be able to do something like that, and also notably, it's a family film, and things like that aren't often done, in the UK on a small budget.